Welcome to From the Field, Farm Chat with Idaho Wheat. I am Brittany. I'm the Executive Director of the Idaho Wheat Commission, and today we are talking with Steve Wirsching from U.S. Wheat. He is, well, I'll let you introduce yourself, Steve. But before I turn it over to you, I just want to remind anyone on the call, please ask questions. You're welcome to ask questions. You can do that either by using the reactions button to raise your hand. You can type it into the chat at the bottom of your screen, or you can just unmute your microphone and I'll notice that and give you a shout out to ask. So Steve, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us about what you do, how long you've been with U.S. Wheat, what you think we should know about you.
Oh no. All right. My name is Steve Wirsching. I'm the Vice President and Director of U.S. Wheat West Coast office. I've worked for U.S. Wheat now for 32 years and served U.S. Wheat growers in Santiago, Chile for a couple of years. And then I worked in the Mexico City office for 10 years. And now I've been the director of the U.S. Wheat Portland office for the last, 16 years now. So it's been a really good career for me. And I'm always learning new things. And some days, it's never a dull day. So some days I get surprised. So I hope that this conversation can be interesting to you. And I hope we get a few questions along the way as well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I am a Vandal. So
That's right.
I went to the University of Idaho and graduated twice. Undergraduate in ag business, graduate degree in ag econ. So, yeah.
All right. And you grew up in?
South Idaho, Meridian, Idaho.
Oh, Meridian. Okay. Yeah. All right. So yeah, greater Boise area now. It looks
a little different. I grew up.
How many offices does U.S. Wheat have, Steve?
U.S. Wheat is an international market development organization that represents wheat growers' interests overseas. We have 13 offices around the world serving about 100 different markets. So yeah, it's a worldwide organization, and I think that's what makes things so interesting, as well as really enables us to do our job.
Part of that job is to prioritize regions and programs for funding, right? You get funding from the state members of U.S. Wheat and also federal funding through RAP.
Yeah, our base funding comes from the state wheat commissions and essentially comes directly from growers' assessment on the first point of sale. That accounts for about a third of our U.S. Wheat funding. The other 2/3 comes from USDA in the form of market development or foreign market development program and market access program, as well as now they're having RAP funding as well.
And how do you decide what programs to fund between those 15 offices?
Besides
distribute that money.
Besides flipping a coin, no, it's a very detailed process. It's called the Unified Export Strategy, or UES. And in a sense, we do a lot of boots on the ground market analysis and evaluation, and we essentially look at the strengths and the weaknesses of different markets and the opportunities and threats. as we go, and we write this up in the forum. It's very much like a grant writing process. The UES is very much like a grant writing process that we submit to the USDA. And at that point, the USDA decides which activities and which markets to fund. I must say, because of those 13 overseas offices supported by office in Portland and an office in Arlington, Virginia, as well as the state wheat commissions, we do very well in when we submit that UES plan to the USDA, and our UES is, I guess, shown as an example of how to do it and how to do it well.
And that's an annual process,
And each
right?
year we have to reapply. Yes. Now, thank you for reminding that. It's not a one and done. Each year we reapply. U.S. Wheat Associates as a nonprofit trade association. We do receive a lot of oversight from USDA and interact almost on a daily basis with the embassy staff overseas. So when I was stationed in Mexico, we interacted with the agricultural attaché all the time, and we invite USDA into our programs. So if we're holding a seminar overseas, we will invite the ag attachés and other embassy staff to attend. So they know what's going on, they can understand our programs, and we feel like if USD understands what we're doing, they will support what we're doing.
I kind of have a question on that. And I've been to a UES planning meeting or whatever you want to call it. It is very in-depth and organized and strategic, but does the USDA have are you competing when you go to the USDA? Are we competing against the other export commodities, or do they have funding pools, and how does that work exactly?
Yeah, Corey, that's a really good question. I appreciate that. The answer is it's a competitive process, and we are competing with the other commodity groups. So we have to do a good job and justify what we're doing. Absolutely. And so, we do have a USDA representative that reviews the process and essentially goes through the UES line by line.
How much over the past 5, 10, 20 years, how much has that funding changed, the allocation of that funding from USDA? And do we anticipate more changes in the future? Obviously, everything's more expensive now. When we host trade teams, we do crop quality tours in other countries. Have we seen a reflection of increased prices in the federal allocation of dollars?
Another great question. I don't have those numbers in front of me right now, but I can tell you that MAP and FMD have essentially been flatlined for the last 20 years. So as you know and understand that it's much more expensive now to do an activity or host a seminar than it was 20 years ago, as well as there's a lot of competition with other commodity groups, as well as other overseas wheat sellers. So yeah, our funding in that area has decreased. However, now with RAP funding, we believe, and previously the ATP funding, we believe that's starting to make that up, in the sense that that's going to fill the gap, if you will.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah. I wish I had the numbers in front of me and I could tell you the exact amounts, but
I,
I
I
would
think
say U.S. Wheat Associates as an organization certainly has had to adopt more technology, become more efficient, prioritize what we do, uh, certainly take advantage of those opportunities that we have, um, because funding is always tight and always competitive. However, we did receive relief with this latest allocation of RAP funding.
On that, MAP and FMD are funded out of the Farm Bill, or are they separate pieces of legislation? And how does something like RAP get done?
Good question. MAP and FMD are included in the overall Farm Bill. They've been kind of bellwether programs for a long time. The RAP funding is something that put monies in place for 5 years. It's basically money out of the Commodity Credit Corporation (CCC) funding that has now been put into market development because uh, USDA felt like we needed just more push to promote our ag commodities. Looks like you're
think
turning
the key
around.
point, the key point there, and something that we always take back to our growers, because our donation to U.S. Wheat is obviously paid for with assessment dollars, right?
Mhm.
Is that U.S. Wheat is doing all of this work with essentially fewer and fewer and fewer resources. As inflation increases, the dollar amount hasn't changed in 20 years, but how far that dollar goes
Certainly
is
have.
tighter and tighter for U.S. Wheat. And you're doing, I think you're doing a really phenomenal job of making sure U.S. Wheat, Idaho Wheat gets to the markets.
Well, and I'll say this too. We've seen the grower support increase, I believe, appropriately, meaning that the state wheat commissions are giving more. They're staying within that range of 30-35% of our budget, which has been wonderful. And I'll say that if we did not, as a commodity group, if we did not have the support of the growers, USDA would not give us money. It's like, well, if these activities and this organization is representing you well enough to where you're willing to give your hard-earned dollars first, then we will also contribute to that. But if our funding was decreasing and growers did not want to participate, or membership, the state wheat commission were not members of U.S. Wheat, well then USDA would not fund us. So that's the grand bargain. And I will say, thanks to the states and the state's assessment or checkoff dollars, they've been very supportive. As well as, I will say, they support us in other ways that are not just financial. Our board of directors is comprised of all U.S. wheat producers, and which is, I wouldn't say unusual, but it's somewhat unique. Other commodity groups do have commercial interests on their board, some voting, some non-voting, and U.S. Wheat Associates is a group that only has growers on our board of directors. Certainly, we interact with the commercial interests and grain merchandisers and flour millers and everybody else, but I'll just say this: it makes my job easier when I know that I'm working for farmers, and one entity, as well as having to maybe split some of my loyalties and say, well, you have the farmers on this side and the grain merchandisers on that side, and oftentimes there can be disagreements or conflicts, and I know where I stand. I stand on the side of the farmer.
So Clark Hamilton is currently the chair
Mm-hmm.
of U.S. Wheat.
Another Idaho guy, right?
Yeah. And Corey's also on the board of
Yep.
directors.
Uh-huh.
How do you take advantage of, let's use Clark, for example. How do you take advantage of Clark's skills and expertise during his term on the executive committee and as chairman?
Right. Well, I'll give you an example. Clark, will be asked to attend many of these U.S. wheat market development programs and or seminars or conferences. I think his dance card is going to be pretty full this year. I'll use my example. I asked Clark to come to North Asia and be the grower that's participating in the North Asia crop quality seminars. We'll be in Japan, Korea, China, and Taiwan. And it's a really kind of sensitive area, sensitive markets, tricky markets, if you will. And we need growers that are well spoken and can explain things like chemical usage, fertilizer usage, how they follow the label to the letter, how they need to use, licensed applicators and or get licensed themselves to apply pesticides and other crop protectants, as well as, God forbid, the GM question. So I think having that message come directly from growers to end users, I think works very well, because Clark can explain that he only uses a certain amount or just enough pesticides to keep the crop healthy, and they do it under the labels, and it's a very good way to have that wholesome message conveyed, as opposed to have someone like me give them the same information. It doesn't land quite as well.
Explain to people on the call or people listening to this later, what are crop quality seminars? What's the purpose and what are they logistically?
Yeah, so each year U.S. Wheat participates in collecting crop quality information for all the different wheat classes: hard red winter, soft red winter, hard red spring wheat, and certainly soft white wheat. The soft white analysis and sample analysis is done at the Wheat Marketing Center here in Portland, Oregon, where over 450 samples from the tri-state region are analyzed and I think cataloged, if you will. So we certainly believe that a market will function more efficiently if both buyer and seller have equal access to information. And so we're doing these crop quality seminars to essentially show the buyers what the new crop looks like this year and promote that new crop, as well as to help them, understand the value of this quality that we have for this year, and in a sense, get them excited about buying the new crop wheat.
What are some major trends that you're seeing in our overseas markets that will impact U.S. wheat over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, certainly. We've seen a surge of Black Sea wheat and some very cheap European wheat moving into the North African market, and essentially pushing U.S. wheat out of those areas. And I will say most of that is just done on price, meaning that if they can deliver wheat into the international market at a discounted price, oftentimes in those price sensitive markets, they can make headways and take market share away from other traditional suppliers like the United States. However, our quality and functionality of our wheats is superior, and we do a lot of work to educate buyers on that, and essentially make them aware of the end-use qualities and the value that is there in that wheat. Some examples of doing that, one very easy example is teaching our Southeast Asian customers about SRC, or solvent retention capacity. It's a way to essentially show them that our soft wheat is very soft and has all those quality characteristics that they're looking for to make cookies, crackers, and sponge cakes and chiffon cakes, things like that. Whereas Australian wheat are one of our competitors, and to a certain extent having some maybe low protein black sea wheat come into those areas and be blended in as well. Those wheats are semi-hard wheats. Semi-hard, something maybe closer to a hard red winter, but lower protein. And those semi-hard wheats, if you add enough additives and other chemicals, well, you can make them perform similar to a soft wheat, but quite frankly, that gets expensive after a while. So we're literally educating many of these markets and buyers about the high quality and functionality of our wheats, and how to use them, how to identify that quality, and how to differentiate our wheat, our soft wheat, from the competition. I think as these trends go, Russia has had good crops, many good crops in a row, and at some point, the odds will just, at some point, they're going to have a drought as well. So, as you know, we just came out of a 3-year cycle where we had a drought. So, and now this year, we're returning back to normal, and I would say above our 5-year production levels. And now we have wheat to sell. I wish prices were a little better. I know that's the next question coming. Yeah, why is price so low? But I will say at these prices, U.S. wheat is competitive, and our sales for the year to date are up 30%. So that part is good, and that way we can start recapturing some of our markets. I think that as we go on, and some of the I think risk factors are really evaluated with black sea wheat, some of those prices will start to firm up a little bit.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that. As a farmer, you look at the prices and you look at world supply and demand, and it's easy to get discouraged. And I mean, our inputs are sticky. They're not falling as fast as the price of wheat is falling. But
yep,
the few times I've been, at least in the Asia part of the world, I think the demand potential is so great that I'm probably biased, but I'll eat bread and noodles 10 times for every one time I'd rather eat rice. And I think those people are starting to see some of that. Maybe my gut feeling's a little wrong on that, or a little
no, I
think
you're right on. As those Asian, kind of Southeast Asian countries develop economically, and consumers have a little more money in their pocket, they're starting to look to vary their diet more and eat different things. And they're looking at Western style products, and they really enjoy that. And they're eating less rice and more wheat products. And so that's where, you know, a lot of that opportunity comes into our UES calculations. And as if we can get their per capita wheat consumption just a little higher, and in some markets like the Philippines, their population is growing fast, that spells very good demand for our wheat. And I must say, soft white wheat in particular has very few, if any, substitutes. There's really no other countries that produce a similar product. And so that's why I really like the idea of promoting soft white into those markets, because the competition just doesn't have anything that is exactly the same.
And that is a large role that U.S. Wheat has taken on, is to teach the technical aspects of milling, so that countries who maybe are not buying our wheat right now because they can get cheaper wheat from the Black Sea, when the drought does come to Russia, which it will, then they know how to use our wheat appropriately. Right?
They'll know how to use our wheat. Plus, you know, we're not even waiting that long. I mean, quite frankly, there are companies, one in Latin America especially, that prefer using soft wheat, and they don't have any other substitutes. It's not like Argentinian wheat works for that. Canadians really don't have a substitute for that. It's either soft red winter or soft white. And if they're on the Pacific side and have a port on the Pacific Ocean, well, then they're looking at soft white. And we just need to show them that the quality of soft white is there and the value is there, so they can pay a little more for the wheat, because further down the value chain, they'll save money. The other example, and this is a little further afield, is South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa. We do have an office there. We've seen them recently. PepsiCo does produce cookies, crackers, and sponge cakes. And unfortunately, they're struggling because they're trying to make these products with a semi-hard wheat out of the Black Sea. And yeah, the wheat's a lot cheaper, but it's not performing. So we're saying, hey, you know, use soft white or soft red winter. It's a soft wheat. Those products were developed by Nabisco in the United States originally, and you need soft wheats to make those. And so that has been, I think, a real step forward in showing these customers how to meet their in-product quality parameters consistently with U.S. wheat and U.S. wheat quality, instead of trying to buy just the cheapest wheat, milling it in flour, and thinking they can put in additives to make it work. So I think we're making some good progress, and we're also looking to, you know, other markets, new markets, and new ways to sell more wheat overseas, and essentially compete with that cheaper Black Sea wheat.
But how does the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, between Ukraine and Russia, which has gone on now almost 2 years, almost 3 years, and then the conflicts in the Middle East, how do those impact competition and competitors for U.S. wheat?
Right. Well, on one hand, certainly those sorts of conflicts make shipping more expensive as vessels need to avoid the Red Sea, as well as vessels having trouble transiting in or out of the Black Sea. It just makes shipping and movement of wheat more expensive. On the other hand, it's been interesting because both Russia and the Ukraine need to sell their wheat to raise hard currency, to earn hard currency, so they can continue to fund their war effort. And so that's why the Ukraine and Russia have been very creative and very resourceful in keeping their wheat flowing and moving into other markets. And hopefully they can, because nobody wants to have shortfalls in parts of Africa or the Middle East or other things like that due to war. But what I would say, they are selling based just on price and lowest price, and not much is being paid attention to quality. So,
Steve, just a question from the chat. So will that not change as Black Sea wheat production is increasingly unstable or inconsistent due to the conflict?
Well, I've been surprised at how resilient the Ukraine is. Now, I do think that they will be planting a few fewer acres this year, but it's been surprisingly consistent, and that's part of the reason why world prices have not responded more. Now, certainly when Russia initially invaded Ukraine, more than 2.5 years ago, it was shocking how much the market went up. But now the market seems to be almost numb to that because Russia and the Ukraine continue to find ways to export their wheat.
Are there?
Oh, go ahead.
Do you see any emerging markets that are coming up that show promise for U.S. wheat?
We do. I did kind of mention, the Southeast Asia markets. Certainly in that area, I would kind of point to, you look at North Asia and Korea, Taiwan, Japan, even China. They're more mature markets, and incomes and consumption has kind of gone up already. But you look at other markets like Indonesia, very large population, Vietnam, I would say a young, growing population, Thailand, Malaysia, and that area, all those markets are experiencing similar things. When labor becomes too expensive in China, they're moving to Vietnam, and when it gets too expensive in Vietnam, they're moving to Cambodia and so on. And so that sort of economic growth is driving higher incomes and more wheat consumption as those people, look to diversify their diets and consume different Western style products. And the first time I went to Vietnam in 2005, I must admit it was a very different country. I went back in 2015 and will be going back here next year. It's just changed so much. It's amazing. And those are, I think, new and exciting opportunities for us. That said, I also look at getting back into some of those West African markets that, we did get pushed out of Nigeria a little bit, and now that we have more hardwood winter to sell, we're making some sales there. But other markets around that area, I think, do hold some real promise. That said, Latin America, it's kind of interesting because oftentimes we hear about, Venezuela this and, Mexico that, but there's many other countries that are actually developing very well, and their per capita wheat consumption is starting to go up as their incomes increase. Certainly, I did mention that I started and worked in Mexico at the U.S. Wheat Mexico office. It's a regional office. We covered Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, and Venezuela. And at that time, in 1998, Mexico was not importing that much wheat. And we knew that things would change and the market would be pried open with the NAFTA agreement, and that Mexico would have to take down many of its import barriers and allow the import of grain and wheat in particular. And now Mexico is the single largest market for us, surpassing Japan. And so that's kind of an example of how, market development work and free trade agreements can change things for us. We do have a small allocation to ship 500,000 tons of U.S. wheat into northern Brazil. And certainly this year, U.S. wheat has been competitive enough to where we've seen some shipped there. So that's not white wheat, but it's a good hard red winter. So those are some other opportunities that are kind of out there.
Let's talk about hard white.
Yeah, let's.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Do you see any change in markets for hard white? Are we making headway there?
I'll start by saying that when I started with U.S. Wheat in 1992, one of my first jobs was to take samples of California Classic hard white wheat and ship it over to Asian markets because they were interested in hard white, and we as an organization wanted to better compete with Australian wheat in the Asian noodle market because we didn't have a direct replacement for ASW. And we've done a lot of work, and I must say Idaho has released hard white varieties and done a lot of work. There's a lot of spring hard white produced in Idaho as well, but we just still haven't produced enough wheat to have critical mass or supply to maintain an overseas export market. Now, we came very close with hard white being produced in Kansas that was being shipped out the U.S. Gulf to Nigeria. Nigeria was using that for ramen-style noodles as well as high extraction flours and breads, and they loved it. But certainly the drought has taken its toll, and the production of hard white has again dropped down to a very low level to where we haven't been able to support that market. So if I would be so bold to say if we could figure out a way to grow it, there are markets for it. So continue to have markets for it. But we've just struggled with ways to grow enough to support those steady demand of an export market.
It's kind of a chicken or an egg thing, and I don't know what comes first, but logistics is a major part of the problem, in my opinion, at least for Idaho hard white spring, which
Yeah, yeah,
is a little probably higher quality, I think, than Midwest hard white winter, but it's all grown in southern Idaho, and there's no good ways to get from southern Idaho to the port.
yeah. Unfortunately, um, we did work on some of those things when I was in Mexico, and the UP switching station. I can't remember now, but it was somewhere in Utah. Couldn't link up with the BN or Fedomex to get it across the border economically, and so you guys are quite frankly well positioned to load rail cars and ship them into northern Mexico. If we could just figure out the rail.
If we could just figure out the rail.
Well, and the problem is every time you think, because generally buyers buy hard white at the same price they would buy a similar protein hard red winter, but the country elevators want a premium to handle it, and so that's where we get hung up. So, but hang in there. That spring hard white is valued by our domestic market. They're making ultra grain flour with it, and I think certainly whole grain products made with hard white are fantastic. So keep putting some money into your breeding program and keep those hard white spring varieties alive.
Sorry, I'm going around a telephone pole, but yeah, we do have some pretty good spring varieties supposedly coming through, and I do think my bids I got today, hard white spring is priced exactly halfway between hard red winter and DNS in our area locally. So I think there's still a lot of interest in growing it, and most farmers would rather grow it than DNS because the protein's so much easier to hit. But it's just that critical mass. So far it's whatever our domestic local market will take, and there's not much left over. And I don't know how we get past that point to where we say, all right, let's figure out a way to make this work. Because I think it's a great quality product. But once again, I'm biased.
Well, unfortunately, I did mention that I've been working on it since '92, so I'm actually a little biased myself. I'm a big fan of hard white. It's just that in that time, we haven't quite figured out how to break down some of those, supply chain barriers at this point. So,
yeah, and maybe it is to some point. We cook with it at home when my wife mills just a little bit of her wheat, not like everyday type thing, but when we feel like homemade bread, and it's the best whole wheat bread you can possibly ever eat. And I don't know, school lunch programs or something is a way to go with that, or I think that's been explored, or I've heard something about it.
Well, it was implemented at one time where they did mandate a percentage of whole grains in the whole healthy grains in the school lunch programs, but again, I think the cost became somewhat restrictive, and they were like, well, kids are throwing it away anyway, so we should not be mandating this. Anyway, that's kind of where that one went. But I haven't lost faith in it. I think it still is something really good. And in the future, when consumers are going to be looking for something else, organic, a whole grain or something, hard white will fit very nicely into that. And by that time, we'll have very good, resilient, agronomically resilient varieties that yield well, and then hard white will fit very well into those markets. So we're not.
Last question, Steve.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Did you have something else to add?
No, I don't have anything else to add. Then I'm seeing the soft white right now, and I don't know. A lot of times I'll get questions from other farmers like, "What are my checkoff dollars doing?" And U.S. Wheat is the one that's always easiest for me to point at. Like that air drill's half full of fertilizer back there, and I had probably 4 different suppliers for who to buy that fertilizer from. They're all pretty much the same price, all pretty much the same product. And the way I pick who I choose is their service. I think that's where U.S. Wheat comes into play and how we compete against all these other countries, especially when we're not maybe the lowest price. It's the service we provide. So that's my little sales pitch for U.S. Wheat that I try to give, that I thought I'd throw in there.
No, that's really good, and thanks, Corey, because yeah, that's kind of what one of our mantras. We say we provide that after sales customer service to help our buyers get the most value out of our wheat, and generally buyers are willing to pay a premium for that. Obviously that premium can be limited when the price of the competition drops down too much, but yeah, generally our wheat sells in the international market at a premium. So any other questions?
Yeah, one last question, Steve. I wasn't going to bring this up, but you mentioned GM wheat at the beginning. What is U.S. Wheat doing to provide information and support so that when the day comes that GM wheat is grown commercially in the United States, our overseas customers are willing to accept it, or at least have reasonable thresholds to accept it?
Well, that's again another good question. I think you're probably looking into the future, 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So we're not there yet. So nobody needs to get too worried quite yet. And I will say, over the years, U.S. Wheat and NOG and other allied industries, we've worked together to put together the principles of commercialization, where even our competitors in Canada and Australia have also supported this effort and signed off on these, such that when the day comes and producers have need this and have access to this new technology, when the day comes, the market will be ready and buyers will be ready. Part of that is having the traits approved by each country and their Ministry of Health, working with suppliers to understand proper ways to identify it, having good testing procedures and monitoring procedures. So, but yeah, I don't have access to that right now, but it is on our webpage, the principles of commercialization. So, and as you know, we are working with our major markets to make them aware of these things and answer their questions. So, and I think it's one of those things, because generally most buyers want a reliable and sustainable supply of high quality wheat, and certainly our regulatory system and our marketing system is very transparent. So they'll be able to see these things and understand why this technology would or would not be adopted accordingly. And hopefully we can do that in a way that does not disrupt the market and keeps all of our buyers happy. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve, certainly for all of the work that you do on behalf of Idaho's wheat growers and their families.
So when are you bringing a group from Idaho back to the Wheat Marketing Center? And
January.
Okay, I'll see you then.
All right.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yes, we will be there in January. So
all right.
We always look forward to that. But thank you for spending time with us today, also for spending your lunch with us. This was a great conversation. I think it was very informative to our farmers who might not know all of the ins and outs of U.S. Wheat and what you're doing, the work that you're doing on their behalf. So thank you so much for that.
All right.
This episode will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel and podcast platforms. So feel free to share it with anyone that you would like to share it with, or anyone who might be interested in it. And we will see you back here for our next From the Field.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve.